Do the people know that they are dead?
Well, that's a big thing, because first of all, I found that astral world looks so similar to the physical that it's almost impossible to tell apart. You know, everything down to the minute scratches or grass or grains of sand, everything looks very physical and it feels very physical. Mm-hmm. So initially I tried to figure out what the difference actually is. So I did tests like, could I actually cut through a lamppost with my hand, you know, and I felt there was a resistance, but it was possible. So there is a materiality.
Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Renate McNay and my guest today is Jürgen Siebe. Hello Jürgen.
Hello,
nice
Renate.
To have you here.
And you, thank you.
Jürgen is a commercial artist. He wrote 3 books. The first one is Vistas of Infinity, and it has a great subtitle, which is How to Enjoy Life When You Are Dead. We find out about that. Then the multidimensional man and the 10 minutes moment. I was looking forward to talking to you about out-of-body experiences.
Okay.
As you know, I did a lot of traveling myself. So I wanted to know about your experiences. And maybe we start by you telling us how it all started.
Yes. I mean, I mentioned earlier to when I spoke to Ian, I had an intensive experience before, and after that I started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. The first one came totally out of the blue, and I didn't really know what actually had taken place because I didn't know about any of these phenomena, and it was quite unsettling, really. You know, but later on.
So what happened? Did you go somewhere, or you just went out and looked
Yes,
at
what happened?
yourself?
I suddenly found myself. It was early in the morning. I suddenly found myself in front of my mother's house, and I couldn't figure out how I got there because we lived 80 miles away from it, and I was totally confused because also I could see. Had 360-degree vision, and everything was so real that I had no explanation for it. So the first thing was, how did I get here, and how do I get back? Do I have to take the bus or something like that, you know? And when the panic started setting in, you know, or the confusion, I suddenly found myself back in my body, and there was literally no break in consciousness. I was awake, and when I got back into my body, I was still awake. And this led to me finding out about what possible phenomena could I have experienced. Yeah. And then gradually I started reading about out-of-body experiences after I searched the library.
Did it happen more often, or was this just a one-off experience?
The first one happened, it startled me so much that I needed to find out what happened. And once I found out through reading a book by Castaneda that was what had taken place, I became very curious about it. And then shortly afterwards we moved to England. And in the English language, there were a lot more books. So I found a couple of books by English authors, which was Carrington and Muldoon and Oliver Fox. They were probably the only books available at the time on the subject. And then I became really curious about the whole thing, and I started experimenting with it. And the first time it happened was when on the first occasion was when I felt a tremendous sort of like thunder, you know, and noise in my head and things, which was quite disconcerting. But after a while it became quite natural. I used to roll out of my body and then look around or go around the room, then look at myself from the back and then re-enter my body. And so I started a series of experiments after that.
So you rolled out
Yes.
that way and not leaving.
No, that was one of the methods which was suggested in the book, and I found that worked really well, you know.
Yes. And you, it happened always spontaneously, or you put an intent?
Yes, and initially when I wanted it to happen, I focused intensively on it. I put an intent, I meditated, and very often it happened when I went back to sleep, and I then became aware of my astral body. You know, after there was usually some noise associated with it, and I knew when the time was ready to leave my body. You know.
So what is the astral body?
Well, at first, at that time, I didn't know much about it, so I started having, you know, I read a bit about it, but I then much later I found out that we have several bodies, really several energy bodies, and at first, in the first few weeks, I found that I was able to project out of the body and still could see my body. And later I came up with a theory that when that happens, we are possibly connected to a body which is very close to the physical body, the etheric body, which still has the physical senses and an awareness of the physical reality. And then I find when this stage is overcome, that we become more naturally attuned to our astral body, then we don't enter anymore the physical astral or the etheric body, and we go straight into the astral plane, and then it's from then on that we go on to visit other dimensions. So we're not in contact anymore with the physical reality, you know. And that's how I find that people who have near-death experiences or had an accident, they can still see their body because they're seeing it through their etheric body, but more experienced astral travelers, they skip through this stage and go straight into the astral body and then visit.
So you travel into other dimensions, other reality, but you stop traveling in this dimension.
Yes. And that's where a lot of the confusion happens, because people feel if you have an out-of-body experience, you should be able to make tests and then confirm it. For example, you go to a place, or you read a number, or you make certain observations, and then report back that would prove that you have an out-of-body experience. But in reality, that is not how it works, because we enter via our astral body into a parallel world, you know, which is a copy of the physical world or a completely different world.
So is this also the world we go after we die?
Yes, that's where I sort of met my mother after she died, and various other people, and I talked to them. And
so this world looks similar to our world?
Yes, I mean.
And what's the difference?
Well,
do the people know that they are dead?
Well, that's a big thing, because first of all, I found that the astral world looks so similar to the physical that it's almost impossible to tell apart. You know, everything down to the minute scratches or grass or grains of sand, everything looks very physical, and it feels very physical. So initially I tried to figure out what the difference actually is. So I did tests like, could I actually cut through a lamppost with my hand, you know, and I felt there was a resistance, but it was possible. So there is a materiality to the astral world, but it's more dynamic, you know, and it's usually affected by our will or our consciousness. And of course, much later I found out there are an infinite number of different worlds we can visit, different realities which feel exactly as physically as this reality does.
And the people go there to work and have children and...
Well, Yeah, I mean, people have children in terms of that. I visited families with children, and I visited nurseries, places where the children grow up. It's almost exactly like here, even to the extent that there are buses, taxis, even supermarkets, And the thing is, of course, you wonder why should you have supermarkets and things like that. But everything that exists here has got a copy there, which is also visited by people, who have died, or people who are asleep, So they spend time carrying on with their work or carrying on with their jobs while they're asleep, or other people who are in the habit of having a job, let's say as a taxi driver. They may still feel there's a service for them on the next level.
What's behind that, Jürgen? What's the purpose of having a copy of this reality?
I think the main reason is that everything, everything that exists has got a higher energy field around it, which sort of manifests on a different level, and is usually created out of our habits, what we're used to, our ideas, and so while we are engaged in this world, we create through our thoughts a copy of this world, which has got existence on a finer dimensional level. So we are maintaining this astral world via our being physically alive. But of course that's not the end of it, because what I found out later is that we live in a multi-dimensional world. So everything has got a copy of itself on different dimensions, on different higher and higher dimensions. And I noticed that when I went to my mother's house, on the first astral level it looked almost identical to my mother's house. And when I went on to a finer, higher level, which was more beautiful and lighter, the house also looked more beautiful, and the garden was more profuse. And as you go higher, the house may actually be just like a place, there may not be an actual physical house anymore. There may just be shrubs and flowers, but you can still feel the atmosphere of the house. So I found right up to there is such a thing. It's almost like everything has got a soul aspect to it. Everything has got a point of origin, and it's connected right through to the highest state of consciousness. Everything is connected in a sort of vertical line, and it's a very big subject, and I find there's so much more to explore and to write about.
I know you have I have so many notes. I don't know where to start, but you had this experience where you saw an incredible structure in space, and that's where you saw your multidimensional being. And there was the now, the past, and the future, and you could zoom into any of it, and it became a reality.
Yes, that's the thing. That's a very interesting concept, which really needs a lot more exploring, because every object, everything that exists is also infinite, you know. I remember Robert Wagner, he mentioned in one of the interviews that he looked at his hand, and then he saw the pore of his skin, and the pore became a canyon through which he could travel, you know. And this is the thing, everything is infinite, and everything can expand infinitely into something else. I had so the other thing is, everything that exists and everything that has existed is also simultaneously still there. And when for example, I had experiences of a past life, you know, and the way I could see it was in terms of it actually happening in the here and now. You know, so first of all, I saw a person who was walking along a path, and then I recognized that I was a person, and then at that moment there were two of me. There was a person who was walking along the path, who I could study all his thoughts, his identity and everything. I was completely aware of it. Then there was the other me, which was the observer, who knew that this was an out-of-body experience, but the person who was walking along the path was totally oblivious of the observer, and the observer couldn't have any control or influence of the person. So basically it was a connection to another reality, which to us seems to be in the past, but was actually happening in the present moment, here and now. So that's a big mystery of consciousness, you know, which is so difficult to explain and so difficult to understand, because we see a reality on a three-dimensional level, whereas consciousness is on a multidimensional level.
Yeah, I had myself a very similar experience, and where I was just sitting in a garden somewhere, and all of a sudden out of me formed this balloon which had, and now I try to translate certain things you have difficulties finding words, but it was like a net around this balloon, and I saw myself in every cross point of the net in a different time, in a different situation, and I saw in detail how I looked like and what I was doing, and I spoke about that with my teacher then, and he said, well, that seems to be a common experience, which is called the Indra's net. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yes, I have actually experienced it very similar to how you experience it.
Yeah.
You know, a big cosmic web.
Yes.
And at least, even to the extent that I found, that's the other curious thing, I found that at each point of the net, we form the center of the universe.
Yes.
You know, and each object is also at a center of a web. So each atom is basically a center of the universe from which everything radiates out. And my experience was that I found this is how people identify themselves as an individual, as an ego.
Yeah.
And to themselves in this experience, it creates the identity which makes them the most important thing in the world, because the whole universe seems to be finding out from this point in the web.
Yeah.
You know.
And I remember when I saw that, I had an incredible shock, and I thought, oh my God, how do I get out of that? And it was interesting, and then it was something like a banner coming in, and it said on this banner, you are out of everything by being completely here where you are right now.
Yes.
And that's what you spoke earlier in the interview with Ian.
Yeah.
You know, you have to just focus on the now.
Yes, that's right.
And it's like then everything else collapses. You don't hold it.
No. And also it gives you this tremendous overview of things. You see the whole thing in context. And the other thing I found was I could also see like you did, the past, all my past lives, and each one was a reality. You know, you could go back into. You know, and also you see all your potentials and everything, and you can only see that when you have this sort of elevated view of being identified or being sort of tuned into the present moment, then you can see everything in context.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your adventures in other realities. What was the most beautiful adventure? What was the most scary?
Yeah, I had a very strong desire to find out as much as I could. So what I did is, the moment I had my out-of-body experience, the first thing I did, I would focus on the ground or on a detail until I had established full waking consciousness, you know. And then after I established it, I found I could extend it by refocusing, and until it became almost natural, until it was more natural to be in that state than it would be in my physical state. And
did your physical body suffer?
No.
In any sense, with you
No.
being all the time gone?
No, quite the opposite. It felt really sort
yeah.
of totally at peace, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at one stage, in one of the early experiences, I actually extended the time I was out of my body for 6 hours. So I left my body around about 12 o'clock at night, and I came back at 6 in the morning. And during this time, I became more and more aware of my out-of-body state. It became more and more natural. And at certain times, I felt I wondered whether I had died, or whether I could even go back, because it felt it needed more effort to get back into my body than it would to actually remain here, you know. And so I went back to my body a couple of times to check whether I was still alive, you know. So then later I used this method of extending my out-of-body experiences by having a sort of work schedule. I would interview people, dead people, you know. I would talk to my mother.
How was that, finding your mother?
Yeah, that was really interesting.
And she recognized you?
Yes, what happened when she died, my mother suffered from severe depression before she died. And for a couple of years, I couldn't reach her. You know, I tried to reach her. I could only reach my grandmother, who was with her, but she told me that she is like encapsulated with her depression. You know, there was nothing she could do. We just had to wait. And, you know, so then about 6 months later, after I saw her the last time in this state, I called her and I met her, and this time she was completely the way I remembered her. And we met in a beautiful park, and the first thing we did was we hugged each other, and I immediately recognized my mother by her hug, by the warmth she sent me, you know. And then we started talking for the first time after she died for ages. And then after that I met her on a regular basis, you know, and I saw how she progressed. So in the last 20 years, what she was up to, and how my interest in spiritual matters reflected back on her, and that she had made her own path, you know, followed her own path. Whereas when she was still alive, she wouldn't talk about any of this, you know. And I found the same happened when I met other relatives of mine. I could talk to them, we would communicate, and they would tell me about what happened to them, how they progressed, and so on. And at the same token, I would also, rather than finding out, exploring the astral levels, I would sometimes use people to interview them, and by talking to them, I could look into their mind, and I would experience what they experience or participate in their knowledge. So I would find out things about their life this way, you know. And the same happened once when I went into a big city, and I wondered why. It was a big hotel. I ended up with a massive buffet, and I wondered why there were waiters and servants when everybody in this world could just have a luxurious holiday. until I find out that people actually seeking out to provide service for other people because it's what they needed. They needed to be able to serve other people. And then one woman I talked to, she directed me to a waiter, and I decided to talk to him, and by talking to him he took me into his past, and I relived through him talking to me his past history, where he came out of a really sinister level because he killed people. He was a very dark sort of figure, and he had to work his way up. Mm-hmm. And he told me what happened and how long it took him for somebody to rescue him out of this realm and gradually introduce him into this realm where he was able to serve people and learn the art of serving, you know, be of service rather than being selfish.
So there are dark places,
yes.
And then there is light, so heaven and hell.
Yes, in a way, it's basically what, the way I summarize this whole afterlife experience up is by, when our physical body dies, our inside, our inner mind becomes our external reality.
It's a very frightening thing.
Yeah. So if people are negative, or they have got issues, or they're, you know, they do things which harm other people and so on, the negative inner life is reflected in the outside world. So when they, the environment they're attracted to are usually very dark, bleak places. There may not be any life at all, you know, may just be like derelict towns or a desert or hovels, you know, and I saw that these places, no matter what they did, they couldn't make it any better, you know, they could...
they're trapped.
They're trapped in that unless they change their mindset, you know, or attract people who help them to change their mindset. Yeah. But the opposite is also true, you know, people who have got very positive aspects of themselves, and I think probably the majority of people probably do, you know, because we need to get on together. They very often just skip these regions altogether, and it's very much a matter of finding a place we are used to, or even better, you know. And of course, I would say the positive dimensions, they are much more abundant, you know, and unimaginably so than we can imagine them to be here.
But
so,
Jürgen, we have in our unconscious so much trauma and negativity, and how can we, and just the thought, okay, all that will be revealed in my next life.
Yeah, I find the discovery I made is that somehow when we are confronted with our unconscious on the next level, which usually materializes in some way, it's a lot easier, in some ways it's easier to deal with, because we can see it better, we can see it more. And people who are practicing meditation or on a spiritual path, they can transcend this more easily, you know. Sometimes I found just by chanting a mantra, you know, I found very quickly out that if I use the out-of-body state to carry on with my spiritual practice, with meditation, it takes me immediately out of a negative situation I may have been in, or it takes me into a very high state of consciousness, you know, a samadhi-like state. And it's a lot easier in lots of ways, I found. What the difficulty is that people don't know how to do that or how to access it. Sometimes it can be as little as a command or an intent to get out of these situations. And lucid dreaming can teach us a lot about this state of mind.
So what would you say to somebody who says, you know, I cannot stop my negative thinking, and, you know, he had a terrible childhood and that's all still hanging around. What advice can you give?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, if there are sort of guilt issues, guilt, if people suffer from guilt issues, then the first thing is to find a sense of forgiveness, towards yourself.
Yeah.
To find some form of a positive lever, which could either be forgiveness, or it could be appreciation or gratitude. Find some sort of positive lever which you focus on, and then help yourself lift yourself out of it.
Vibration up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on the astral plane, it looks literally like sort of a light you can hold on to, or sometimes it can have the appearance of a ladder, which you can climb onto physically, and you can also feel it. Then, if you feel it in your heart, you can ignite this positive aspect, and you can actually see it unfolding and see it growing and getting stronger, and it becomes very visible, and also so you get a positive feedback from your environment. So if you have a positive feeling, the environment lights up. Suddenly you find a flower may spring up on the way, and
changes.
Suddenly that positive feedback reinforces you to have more positive feelings. So in a way that actually helps you to get out of it, And then there is help from other people who come to you, and they can give their light, change the environment, energize you, and give you a positive feeling. The only thing is you have to be ready to take this step. I went into places which I described in the book, where there was a group of people, and they wanted to leave the place. They were ready to get out, and I said, well, all you have to do is have positive feelings, then you rise out of it. And so I tried to demonstrate it, and before I knew, 3 people were clinging onto me. They wanted to have a lift out of their plane, but their negative energy sort of pulled me down back to earth, and I couldn't do anything. And then I tried to explain to them that the feeling has to come from within. They have to be ready to. They have to work on it. And so a lot of work is done by astral helpers. They go into these regions.
Like the bodhisattva.
Yeah, they go into this region.
On the astral levels,
That's right.
Yeah.
And one scene I observed was a music band. I was in a very, very dark place, looking around, and then I suddenly saw a light in the town square, and when I followed the light, there was a band playing, making music, and they came from a higher level and just playing music, and all around them, in a circumference of about 30 meters or so, there was light, and flowers started growing, and people started dancing, and that gradually spread, and the atmosphere in this region was lifted. And the people around this group of musicians suddenly had the extra energy for them to progress.
Yeah, but in a way you have similar situations here in this world.
Exactly.
You walk into a house or into a room and you feel uplifted, and you feel good. And then you meet people or places where you feel dragged down. Did you ever try to teach out of body, to take somebody out of the body?
No, I haven't, but here on the physical level. No, I have never. I never sort of seen myself as a teacher or anything.
I did for several years. I did seminars. I had the ability to take people out of their body. Because I thought people need to experience that they are not only their body.
Yes, that's a great...
And I did it by leaving my own body and then talking to the group, and so it worked energetically. They could tune into my vibration.
Yeah, I've got friends who can do that, but I've never really sort of gone into this area. You know, I've sort of more saw myself as a reporter, you know, doing things, write about it and report back. My biggest sort of ambition was to illuminate, you know, the unknown in a way, and write about it, so people who are confronted with it, they have got a little bit of a compass and know what can be done, where they can end up. And also the most important thing I found is that we really need to work now, while we're still alive, to develop these positive attitudes, you know, to look in terms of how we can serve rather than serve ourselves, you know, how we can enrich life, you know, and so on, and focus on the greater good, or become aware, because most people are not even aware. They act or they behave as if they're in a dream. They follow their instincts. And this awareness is really important when we become aware what we are, that we are not just a physical entity. This will help us then to progress much faster once we have left this world.
Well, do we really think there is hope in the moment? There are not many people around.
No, it looks pretty dark, but I think there is a trickle-down effect, you know, and the more people experience it, the more people are on this, you know, in this mindset, the more it will trickle down on a perhaps completely unconscious level. That's how I feel. So I don't see things quite negative, as negative as some people see it. You know, I see it quite positively. I feel there is a definite trickle-down effect and a shift towards a greater awareness, which is sometimes at the moment it feels as if it's gone the opposite way, but I don't think it is. You know, it's just working its way through the darker spheres, you know, to come to the surface.
So, how was your out-of-body experiences important for your realization of who you are, and for enlightenment? I know you don't like to use the word enlightenment, but awaken. Yeah.
What I found was that I had, while I was practicing the meditation, I had these out-of-body experiences, and I had very profound spiritual experiences during the out-of-body state, you know, which were on the same level as the first experience, spontaneous experience I ever had. The same sort of level of clarity and cosmic consciousness, you know, which I experienced then. But of course, that happened on an inner level. So I was seeing things, let's say the external aspect of the higher states, in terms of the surrounding and the areas, like one could say is the archetypal heaven state, is a state of consciousness where you feel you're totally at home. It's like a big homecoming. There is no strangeness anymore. There is no outside. Everything is reflected in the environment. You have got a connection to everything, and everything is alive and conscious. So the outside world, so to speak, or the environment is alive with consciousness and intelligence. You know, so you find a connection to everything you look at, and everything you look at or which enters your attention, you can get into and find its essence. And it doesn't matter whether it's some other person or whether it's an object or an animal. There's always a possibility to get into the essence of everything that is in your environment. And the same is with perception. You know, so instead of seeing things, let's say, looking at the flowers, instead of looking at the flower, you become the flower then, and you can feel what the flower is like, what the flowerness is all about. You can feel every part of it and understand it, and you also simultaneously know the origin. So it's a completely different way of perception. You know, instead of looking at it from the outside, you actually become, when you see a color, you become the color. You know what a color feels like. You know, if it's a red, you know what redness feels like. If you hear a sound, instead of listening to the sound, you become the sound. You feel like the sound. You know what the sound can do and how it sort of vibrates with other sounds. And that is the perception of the higher consciousness. You no longer a perceiver, you are actually the innovator of the world.
Is that the level you talk about, I think, in one of your books, when you for the first time felt you are a human?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that is the origin point of where we are. You know, it's coming back to the origin. Our essence, you know, and our human essence is basically rooted in the consciousness which is universal, you know, and the way I can see it is like we are an aspect of this consciousness which has individualized itself and uses our structure to gain experience, to manifest, do all sorts of things. But at the basis of it all is this humanness, you know, this essence, this homeness of what we really are, the authentic being state, you know. And once we recognize that, we actually also recognize that in other people, you know, and we cannot get away from it. We can't. At that point, it becomes impossible to see people as strangers. You know, they're all, instead of saying, "Oh, who is this person?" and be fearful, the first contact point is seeing what we're sharing with this person. So the world instinctively becomes a much friendlier place, you know, and much more familiar
Would
place.
So the essence of the human, would you, let me just see where it is, would you say that is God's heart?
Yes, I think so. I think you could say that there's one heartbeat, really, which is, you could say it like that, yes. You know, it's...
and you say, I cannot find it in the moment, you said we have to go through all this to find God's heart, or our human essence. We have to go through, we want to enter the heart of God, but have to go through multiple dimensions, millionfold more complex and grand than our physical dimension, and can be distracted through them. Every thought is a shape and sound.
Yes, I mean, what I was trying to say is, in order to find the essence, really, is to actually find the heart, you know. And to me, there has always been the shortcut to, you know, everything. Life is so complex and so multidimensional, where we can easily get lost in, unless we have a contact to the authentic beingness of us, which I always felt is achieved via the heart, you know, and the positive energies which are connected with the heart, which is love, appreciation, you know, service, you know, these sort of positive attitudes. And I always suggest to people, when they do meditation, to bring the heart into it, because it also helps to hold the focus of meditation much more easily, because this is driven by an emotion, which is a very positive emotion, rather than focusing on an abstract idea or so, you know.
So bringing the heart in means, so when we meditate, to focus on gratitude, or
yeah, we could start with it, but feel the energy in this place here, you know, feel it and then allow it to grow and unfold until we reach the point of being or stillness. That's how I see it, that's how I experience it. And then I can easily maintain the focus, you know, just by feeling the stillness of everything. And what I'm finding now is that that is actually the base level of reality. You know, is this love aspect of it is everywhere. There's the base, and with that, of course, we have access to the inner joy of everything. You know, and that's why I always feel beyond everything that is happening on the surface, there's a base level, the you know, the base level of reality, which I think is actually bliss. You know, we're just obscuring it by our fears, our anxieties, our self-interests, you know, our different agendas, our problems, upbringing, what have you. This base level, or the bedrock of reality, I find is actually bliss. You know, it's just obscured. That is the status we should really be focusing on.
But then it's our unconscious which pulls us out all the time.
That is what we need to actually have to work with, and with kindness, you know, with generosity, and understanding, because these are aspects of ourselves which also need to be illuminated. But we already carry the you know, the light which allows us to do that, you know, and the quickest way to get rid of darkness is by turning on the light, you know, and my idea of dealing with the shadow side which comes out of our unconscious, by simply boldly facing it, and with forgiveness, with a positive attitude, you know, and perhaps even a sense of gratitude, that we say, oh, thank you for, you know, giving me the chance to make it clear, or to forgive, or to mend, or whatever comes up. You know,
so it feels almost like you are in a state of surrender.
Yes, that's the prevailing state, the surrender state, because that was the first thing I found the most important step. If you want to be anchored in the base level of reality, we need to surrender to it, you know, and we cannot achieve it or get it. We cannot get it, you know. We have to surrender to it, because when we have a spiritual experience, it is not us who is having the spiritual experience. It is a sense of a blessing, or grace, you know, which actually takes us on board, or takes us out of ourselves and unites us, you know. So we can't actually do anything. We just can prepare the way to allow this channel to open. And that's why the only thing we can do is just surrender everything, you know. So if we live in a state of surrender towards the reality that is, then we are closest to it, you know.
So do you feel pretty free, or do you still have challenges?
You know, everyday challenges, obviously.
But you live in a very peaceful place.
Yes, I think so, because I don't have any. I don't have anything that is holding me back. I don't have anything that I feel I need to sort out, you know. But it hasn't always been like that. It's a very laborious and long process. It comes out. Yes, and when it comes out, you have to be grateful for it to come and show you, because it shows there are still certain things you need to deal with, you know. But I would say when you are in this state of being, then you've reached the human level, I would say, the natural human level. And because it's a natural state, once you tune into it, it's much easier to maintain, you know. And now I'm finding it hard to even remember the other shadow sides or the past. I can't relate to it anymore, you know. If people dig out things out of the past, I have no relationship to it anymore. And that's the way it sort of is, because you live in the present moment, and everything is new all the time. There's no repeat. There's no thing which comes back from the past to haunt you, because you have
free.
You have liberated yourself. That's the greatest aspect of it. You've freed yourself of it, and now you have the time to be a human being, you know, and do all the things which human beings can enjoy without being afraid. Beautiful.